Hello, I'm Paul Race, and welcome to my workshop. Today I'm going to talk about something I've been researching for a couple of years now. It has to do with appropriate guitars to use in a 19th century historical reenactment. It also has to do with what they so-called parlor guitars. I want to show you something that you may find looks dinky. I'm not a huge guy, and this guitar looks small on me because it is the kind of guitars that were made in the 1840s and so on. That said, this was considered a full-size guitar right up till about 1900. And it was after 1900 that people started making the larger guitars. And I wanted you to get an idea of kind of a reset of how guitars would look if you dig out any photographs of a music group using guitars before 1900. The guitars look like this one. Now, there was a model that's a little bit wider. It's impossible to tell from the photographs whether it's that one or this size, but I will show you what we consider a full-size guitar today in comparison. This is a Dreadnought. I don't actually use this guitar. I keep it for the sake of students whose guitar is in repair or something of that nature. It's taller, it's wider, and it's even fatter. And Dreadnoughts are noticeable. Dreadnoughts and Jumbos, Gibson's invention, are notable because they have a much deeper low tone than these smaller guitars do. And some people prefer the Dreadnought if you're playing solo and you really want a full rich tone and you don't really care what your guitar looks like in terms of chronology. Then a Dreadnought or a Jumbo will give you that deep, full, rich tone that you will not get on most of the guitars I'm showing you. But this is a late invention. This wasn't invented until after 1900. And up until 1900, there were larger guitars than this, but almost everybody used guitars in this size. This happens to be a size 2. It was invented by Martin sometime around 1839. C.F. Martin. Why is Martin such a big name in guitars in America? Well, because C.F. Martin was the first major guitar manufacturer in this country, and he based his guitars. He made his guitars just a little bit different than they were making them in Europe, and he made them a lot different than the guitars that were available in this country up to now. Because most of the guitars that come to this continent before that were brought in by Spaniards or were made by people with a Spanish heritage. And the old Spanish guitars, and we're talking about classical, what we call classical guitars, that comes later. The old Spanish guitars were much narrower than this. So when C.F. Martin made a guitar with a fuller bout, it's still comfortable to hold. I mean, you put this on your knee, right? I mean, everybody knows how the shape of this instrument is comfortable. But it was a wider bout than they were used to. And so actually, Martin made smaller and narrower guitars than this. This is a size 2. The size 1 guitar, which was his first one, is 3/4 of an inch wider. Now, if you can imagine, if you were looking at old photographs and try to figure out whether they're holding a size 1 or a size 2 guitar, it's pretty much impossible. But every old photograph you see of somebody playing guitar, 99% of them, they're playing either size 2 or size 1 guitars, and I would dare you to tell me which one it is. Up until about 1900, anybody who owned a guitar pretty much had a guitar that looked like this. Other guitars were available. In 1854, another size was invented. Around 1875, another size was invented, and so on. And they did get bigger, but those guitars were considered expensive, and they were considered oversized guitars. And the average person kept a guitar like this. Could you imagine, for instance, if you were a cowboy and you wanted to strap a guitar on your back and ride along with your guitar on the range, tying a Dreadnought to your back? And the answer is no. Most people couldn't have done that. The guitars this size were carried to Civil War encampments. Guitars this size were taken to the Spanish-American War. Guitars this size were used for all sorts of things, including many thousands of public performances throughout the 1800s, from about 1839 to 1900. This was the standard guitar. This was a full-size guitar. When I tell people today this is a full-size guitar, they laugh at me because they're thinking of the Dreadnought. but this was the full-size guitar. Now I'll explain this one specific guitar in a minute, but I want to show you a couple examples of similar instruments that are available today. This one is hard to find. It's been discontinued. But I'm going to start one. The first one of these I bought. This is made by Ibanez. It's exactly the same profile as the one I started out with. You'll notice that it doesn't have slotted heads. Now, slotted heads were normal up through about 1900 because the guitar heads were initially invented by people used to making violin and similar and cellos and similar instruments where the pegs come in from the side. So that's why the slotted heads on the older guitars. This is cheaper. There were a few solid head guitars made in the 1900s. That by itself wouldn't disqualify it. I would, if I was taking this to a serious reenactment, I would put black electrical tape probably over the logos. This is the Ibanez PN1 NT. PN1. I think they look like peanuts, and when you call them a PN1, it just sounds like a peanut, doesn't it? It's a PN1 NT. The NT refers to the natural tone of the spruce. That said, this is a veneer, and the veneer is only razor thin. So it's a nice looking guitar. It doesn't have the sound you would expect. It sounds better than when I bought it. I did adjust the neck, and initially I just was not satisfied with how it played and sounded. But after a few months, it kind of settled in and has a nice enough tone that, especially if I'm taking it to the beach or something like that, it's a very handy little instrument to take to the beach. Or even if I'm going to a reenactment, like a Civil War reenactment or something, if I'm going someplace where the security isn't good or where I'm not sure I'm going to be dry, I'd rather expose this one to the elements and the possibility of vandalism or theft than the other guitars some of the other guitars I'll be showing you. So this is a PN1 NT. It's not a bad beginner guitar. In fact, once it's set up, it's a great beginner guitar. Ibanez makes some other ones that are like, and other companies do, they're like miniature dreadnoughts, and they have a different shape, and kids think they look more like a real guitar. That's fine. I like this size and shape. It's really good for kids to handle. Again, it's 12 frets from the nut to the body. That's the standard for any guitar pretty much made before 1900. And it's okay. This one costs generally this one is available for around $170 I'm making this in February of 2024. Now it'll be more probably by the time you see it, but at least that gives you a frame of reference. It's one of the least expensive guitars in this format that you can find. It has a twin. And that's this one. Identical shape. It has, instead of the veneer being spruce, the veneer is mahogany on this. This is the PN1 MH, and MH stands for mahogany, NT natural tone, MH mahogany. Now they advertised an MHO, which didn't have the shiny face, had a flat face, supposedly open pore. And I ordered one of those, and I got one of these. And I sent it back, and I ordered another one of those from a different company, and I got one of these. So I'm not sure that the open pore version of this ever existed, or if it did, it must have come into this country in such small numbers that they're hard to find. But again, it's identical to the other one except for the color of the face. I like this face better. It looks more historical. Spruce didn't really come into guitar, in most guitar manufacturing until the 1900s. So cedar was more common. Again, you'll notice that the low notes just don't resound like they would on a larger guitar body, but the mid-range and the upper notes do just fine. So I don't use a pick in these demonstrations because it overdrives the microphone on the computer. But it doesn't have a bad tone. I take that other one to beaches. I take it to parties. I'll probably sell it and keep this one because I like the finish on this better. But it's fun to have around if you're playing in somebody's living room. This is as big a guitar as you really need to have. This is the last of the laminated guitars I'm going to show you in this segment. This is made by Luna. It's actually it's well built, has a nice look and feel. It has a mahogany veneer, again, just like the Ibanez with the mahogany veneer. It has a mahogany veneer. It has a satin finish rather than a shiny finish, which is actually a little more authentic. They didn't use 6 layers of varnish on guitars 150 years ago. Luna does tend to have like new agey or ethnic artwork on the guitar, so this is kind of a new age looking thing, if you can see that. It also has 14 frets between the nut and the neck, which again, that didn't occur until the 1900s. But some people just they can't play up here. They don't feel like they've got a guitar, and sadly, some people play in the key of C by bringing the capo halfway up the neck and playing in G. So I mean, if you're one of those people and you need a long neck, this is a good one for you. The other thing, it's about $20 more than the other ones. That said, it actually does have a better sound, fuller sound, which makes no sense considering that it's also a laminated top. Not that much difference in the construction of these guitars, but this one does happen to have a louder tone. Worth noting. So if you have somebody who is looking for a student guitar, any of these laminated guitars I've shown you would be a good way to start. I think the more I play with this one, the more I think this one would make a better starter guitar than the other two. That said, the other one is just a little bit more authentic looking, so who knows. The next guitar I'm going to show you is a solid top guitar in the same class. Again, these are size 2s. Nobody is making a size 1 guitar right now except for Washburn. And now, as we all know, Washburn is actually part of Oscar Schmidt. The guitars are still made in Asia. They tend to make slightly upscale guitars compared to the ones that we've shown you so far. But their size 1 guitars look really nice. They have all the features of this guitar I started out with, except the face is very dark and looks ancient, and they have all kinds of fancy stuff on the fingerboard. Engravings, whatever you want to call it. They look really sharp, and they have one that is laminated, sells in the $600 to $700 range, that has all kinds of quality control problems, and people say it doesn't sound that good. They have another one that's solid face that tends to sell in the $1,000 to $1,200 range that most people say nice things about. I don't have either one. I don't really need to have either one. If you had your heart set on a size 1 guitar that really honestly looks like it was made in 1890, then Washburn might be your bet. Now, I have some other Washburn guitars that I'm going to show you in the next segment. But in the meantime, I'm going to go back to this one that I started with as a good example of a guitar that's appropriate for reenactments pretty much from any time from 1839 on. It's almost identical to the guitars used throughout America between 1840 and 1900. Even the Washburn guitars that were made in that era are patterned after the Martin profile. Later on, we'll talk about how the profile expanded. Once again, the size 1 guitars were 3/4 of an inch wider than the size 2 guitars. The next guitar up was just a little bit wider, and so on. But in the meantime, I just want to show you this one. This is an example of a solid face guitar. It happens to be the Ibanez AVN3, which was only made for a very short time. It's very hard to find. I like it because A, it's a peanut, has that shape and size I like, and also because it has the slotted face and the 12 frets. So it's the most authentic guitar I have in this class in terms of historically accurate. It's also much louder than any of the other 3 that I showed you, and has a really nice balanced tone. So if I'm playing a reenactment where I'm sure I will have control of my instrument from beginning to end, this would be the one I would be most likely to take, especially if it was a pre-1900 reenactment. Now I'll show you some other guitars that are a little bit bigger. Once again, there were larger guitars made than this during the 19th century, but they were considered oversized guitars. And this guitar was the standard guitar size pretty much everybody used between 1840 and 1900. Once again, pull up as many pictures as you want. Once in a while, you'll see a Spanish guitar that has a slightly different shape, but the size is about the same as this. And I'll show you some slightly larger ones in the next segment. In the meantime, have a great day.